What is up, everyone? I hope you're doing fantastic today. It is late on this Saturday, but it's still Saturday, June 5th, 2021, and my name is Raphael Garcia, here for episode number 88 of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. As always, I want to thank you first and foremost for taking the time to listen to this show. Show us support. As always, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching this across one of the podcast channels, which includes Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple iTunes, and Breaker Studio as well. You can always find our content at MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter. You can go to our flagship at MMAratings.net or .com to check out the website there. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter at rgarcia_sports. This show I do I'm trying to get back into doing it weekly, and the MMA Ratings podcast, which is every Wednesday with Schwan Humes. You can catch that show every Wednesday over on our YouTube channel and on those same outlets that I've already mentioned. So today I will be talking wrestling as usual, and I am talking about two main topics. Of course, WWE and AEW. WWE, we're going to be talking about the roster cuts from this week, and AEW will be talking about Andrade joining, which is probably the two biggest pieces of news out of the show. Excuse me. But yes, I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's go ahead and have at it. So first and foremost, let's start with the roster cuts from this Wednesday. And so this started with Sean Ross Sapp over at Fightful. I just had a completely brain drain. Sean Ross Sapp over at Fightful. He was tweeting out about news that there were going to be some roster cuts. He sent that out on Tuesday. I'm not sure if he already knew on Tuesday, but he was basically sending information until the individuals who were going to be cut were cut. He knew before them. So Wednesday comes around and he reveals the names of individuals who were released from their contracts. There were 6 of them: Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, Ruby Riott, Lana, Santana Garrett, and Buddy Murphy. So to say that people were shocked, it would be an understatement. Social media was ablaze that day. I wrote a news piece for it over at Daily DDT, which you can find there. But it was a hell of a mess, because if you look at this list, these are some big names in the organization, or not even necessarily big names, but names that have been utilized up to recently, and some that have not. But they've shown promise and talent that they should have been utilized much more than they actually were. And there's some voices out in the wrestling media space that are looking at this and claiming that this lines up to a potential sale with the WWE, for the WWE to be sold to a new owner, which is the hell of a talking point. I remember just a couple years ago where I was thinking that the UFC would never be sold, and lo and behold, they were sold for billions. I think they were sold for a lot of money. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was back in 2016. So you can never say never. Yes, Vince has been the power-hungry owner of WWE for decades. I always make the joke that he's trying to tank WWE as much as he possibly can before he dies. So that's why he is. This show has been sucking so much. But if there were to be a sale, that would be a massive, massive story there by itself. But I'm not the expert to really talk about that. If you wanted some more information about that, you can definitely go check out Brandon Thurston. He was tweeting about the idea of a potential sale, saying that he's not really on that bus yet. But he provided some really good information about that on Wednesday and Thursday as well. So go check out his Twitter timeline. But what I will be talking about are these individuals who were cut. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into that and have that conversation. So the first name that you see there is Braun Strowman. And this one's not the most shocking one, but this one definitely stood out. And since then, it's been mentioned that his contract was worth $1.2 million. That in 2019, when he was holding out to renegotiate, that's the number that he got because he saw his value, which, you can never blame him. I will never blame an athlete or a performer for getting what they're worth. That is what they are supposed to be doing. But a lot of people in today's social media age, or I guess in today's social media age especially, people jump on performers and athletes who are looking for larger sums of money for their skills, for their talents. And that's just another conversation for another day of when the owners pit fans against the performers. WWE doesn't do that per se. They do things a little bit differently. But Braun did have a 7-figure contract that saw him as expendable in the situation. He was a big deal. Maybe he will renegotiate and come back to the company for a smaller amount of money if that's what he chooses to do. But that is a big number, and that's why he found himself in this round of cuts. And I want to stick on him for a second because there seems to be a lot of conversations about why AEW should not sign him, and I find that really interesting. That AEW fans are almost upset at the idea of Braun Strowman being all elite, and that really that is odd to me because you look at what they've done with some of the signings that they brought over from WWE, and I'm not saying that he should go there, but what I'm saying is that it shouldn't be completely off the table. I mean, we've seen Shawn Spears go over to AEW and had a, bare minimum run to begin with, but now he's as part of the Pinnacle, he's doing something now. So I could see Strowman having some type of run. Yes, he isn't an indie darling. He didn't come from the indie promotions. He has some pretty ridiculous things to say about them when he was playing the company man role on social media last year, actually in April when the first round of cuts went around. So I understand why people may be looking down on him as an idea of him moving over to another promotion, but I don't think that necessarily negates what he could be as a big signing there. I think that he has some value to that promotion. He could be a monster heel and present it in a way that makes sense, that gives him and gives a story value. I could definitely see him being paired with someone and being like a heel monster character, like with if he was in Cody's background or something like that, or as a heel monster, or if Taz brought him in and Taz was the mouthpiece or something like that. Like there's value in adding him to a roster, and I'm not going to sit here and say that he should be completely denigrated and spoken of as if he doesn't have any value to an organization at this time. I could see him doing other things, potentially acting, going to Impact, doing something else, but I'm actually right now leaning more towards him renegotiating and re-signing a deal, going back to WWE, maybe after some time off. He's been off television since the WrestleMania Backlash match in early May. So let's see what his future looks like. But I think he still has some value as a pro wrestler. The Aleister Black one is the one that caught a lot of people by surprise. And the reason being is because Black was just in a story, quote unquote. He last Friday, not yesterday, but the Friday before, he cost Big E the Intercontinental title during that three-way. Was it a three-way? Whatever that match was on SmackDown, and now he's just gone. So not only does that impact Aleister Black, but it also impacts Big E as well. Because is he just supposed to ignore the fact that somebody kicked him in the face, and that's why he's not a champion now? Like, is that how we're looking at this? So that's one big question there. And at the same time, it was well known that Aleister was taken off of television back in December or early January this year, and he was even gone from the promotion for a little while because of what happened with his wife, Zelina Vega, also known as Thea Trinidad. And there was speculation about what was going to happen with him, but we saw those videos, those vignettes of his character being re-established and redeveloped. But This is what we got out of it. Comes on screen, kicks Big E, and then he's released, 3 to 5 days later? That one really kind of caught us all off guard. And again, it is another guy, we're going to be talking about Andrade later on, whose talent is well known. He's shown potential in other organizations. He excelled in NXT, comes to the main roster and just isn't utilized. Something I wrote about with AEW this past week was in reference to AEW embracing the youth they have on their roster. I talked about, if you look at Double or Nothing, which was last Sunday, you have Darby Allin, you have Adam Page, you have Jade Cargill, you have Red Velvet, you have MJF, Sammy Guevara. Those are 6 names of people who are under 30 years old that can be built around and leveraged for a future. You can build around that group right there for 10 years. Then you can also throw in Britt Baker, who just turned 30, Ray Phoenix just turned 30, and Max Caster is 31. So that is a youth movement and a half right there. WWE doesn't do that. They tend to stick with the same old names, and that's why we had the Royal Rumble, where it was mostly guys well into their 30s, in their 30s and older competing. That's why you have Edge winning that at such an advanced age. That's why you had the Elimination Chamber, where all the competitors were 40 years old and up. Yeah, I get that they are established stars, but at some point in time, no one wants to see that anymore. So when you have someone like Aleister Black, who is original, who looks different, who performs different, who's getting over with fans, and we see them just not being utilized in any way, shape, or form, that's where that frustration comes from. That's why they had a historically low Monday Night Raw rating this past week. The content is the same old shit every week, same people, same matches. No one wants to see that. And this is just another example of a performer that they've had on their roster who has performed well with everything that they're given, and then he's just jettisoned like he is nothing. And Buddy Murphy, he's another one. The thing about Buddy Murphy is that, again, 2018, I believe it was 2018, those matches he was having with Mustafa Ali were some of the best on WWE television. Go back and watch. And he brought him up. He was brought up. He had that great match with Daniel Bryan, a tough match with Roman Reigns, and they do the same thing that they do with everyone else. They have that individual lose time and time again, and people stop caring about him. He was in the Mysterio family storyline it was all of a sudden dropped. Him and Aaliyah were quote unquote dating on the show, and that storyline was just suddenly caved in. He was hinted at, him and Seth Rollins having a feud, which would have been amazing. Could you imagine the types of matches Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy could have given us if they were just given a feud of like 4 or 5 months, and some of the matches they were giving us now with WWE's bullshit, we would have gotten that match 3 times 4 is 12. We would have gotten that match 12 times each and every week, but we would have gotten some bangers out of that group. So to see him just cut, it is another situation where it's just like whatever. Like, they just don't care about bringing in new talent, raising up, creating new stars, because they have a massive platform. WWE has a massive media platform. They can create new stars if they wanted to or not, but they choose not to because they're already making money. They have these long-term licensing contracts with these networks. They have they had the deals with Saudi Arabia that I'm sure they're going to go back to at some point in time. They just sold off the WWE network. They are hand over foot last year in the middle of a global pandemic. They had their most lucrative year. So when they look at guys like Aleister Black, Andrade, Buddy Murphy, Braun Strowman, for example, Ruby Riott, we're going to talk about her next. They don't see them as stars, so they just get rid of them, regardless of what the fans may want, and that is actually very unfortunate. It hurts the product overall. To be honest with you, If I wasn't doing this show and if I wasn't covering wrestling for Daily DDT like I would not watch anything WWE has to offer but NXT. Raw doesn't matter. SmackDown, I hear SmackDown is better, but it's on a Friday. That's when I tend to go out, so I don't watch that live either. But the only thing I would watch would be NXT, and you wouldn't be able to tell me anything else. I would think there wouldn't be anything else within the WWE as far as I'm concerned. But I watch everything because of these shows, and I want to see everybody that they have on this list. I want to see them perform because they're different than what we're getting. But that just not isn't going to happen. So you had Aleister Black released as well. I've talked a little bit about Buddy Murphy, and then you also have Ruby Riott, and that's probably the one that hit the most because if you look at the way the locker room responded, man, they were hurt. Like they were hurt big time for losing Ruby because she seemed to be like such a locker room, like a one who was so beloved in the locker room, and that's important, especially as you have a platform that's as mediocre as the WWE. Cuts like these hurt the morale. So when you see men and women coming up at the end of their deals and they don't want to re-sign, shit like this is why. So this Ruby Riott cut has so many different ramifications. First, obviously, they just decided not to get behind the Riott Squad for whatever reason. If I could go back in time and rebook all of this, the Riott Squad would have been in first and foremost, there wouldn't be any NXT women's tag team titles. That would have set up the the Dusty Classic to matter even more because those winners would have gotten a shot at the actual tag team titles that Nia and Ruby Riott, Nia and Shayna Baszler were holding at the time. Then Ruby and Liv would have been in the Dusty Classic. Period. Let them have banger matches with Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell, with Kaden Carter and what's the other lady's name? Kaden Carter and Casey Catanzaro. They would have had a great match with anyone that they would have been paired up against. Toni Storm and Mercedes Martinez when they were a team. They had other teams they had other teams in the Women's Dusty Classic, but we know that those teams weren't necessarily real teams. But the Riott Squad should have been involved and they should have been given an opportunity to put on great matches. Then you have to ask yourself, why weren't they ever women's champions? Like WWE has no plan for the women's division, the women's tag team division, none whatsoever. They're setting the stage to split up Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, which everyone's been asking for an extended period of time. Natalya and Tamina have the titles. Again, two women who are, I think Natalya's like 39 and Tamina's in her 40s. This is not discriminating against women because of their age, nothing like that. No, I'm just saying, where's the new talent? Liv and Ruby should have been front and center there. You have Lana's gone, so now Naomi doesn't have a tag team partner. They broke up their Iconics, cut both of them. They keep doing that type of stuff, and it totally damages the women's division. Right now, there are 7 women on the SmackDown women's roster. 7. We got a Teddy sighting here, folks. 7 women. That's it. That's not a whole division, and they don't put any of them on television except Bianca right now and Bayley. So what are the rest of them supposed to look forward to? Do they want to come up to the main roster? Because that's what you're headed for, catering. Ruby Riott getting cut totally damages that division. And then you have to look at what Ruby's done since she's been in the company. I mean, I fully adored Ruby Riott, and I kind of realized that a couple years back when she was having those matches with Ronda Rousey on a regular basis, kind of trying to help Ronda get through. Like, I wrote a piece about Ruby. I'm trying to find it now. Let me see if I can find it. But I wrote a piece about her a couple years back where I wrote that she was like either the MVP or one of the most improved, something like that, just because she continued to excel in her position. She could wrestle very well. She had a great look to her. She obviously was loved. I really appreciated her. If you go back, and I actually didn't know this, but Alex Pawlowski over on Sour Graps was talking about some of her matches towards the end of her NXT run. Go back and watch some of those because it seems like she's been putting on great matches for an extended period of time. The wrestling public responded they were sad to that situation, but they're looking forward to what's next for her. She should be someone that gets picked up. I hope Impact picks her up because they have a strong women's division. AEW does as well too, but they're headed in a little bit different direction. I wouldn't want to see her just get assimilated into that group. She can have a post WWE run that's a lot like Deonna Purrazzo, so I would like to see her go over to Impact and kind of change that. But she's someone else I'm looking forward to watching, and then wherever she does go, they're going to start getting some of my views as well. Same thing with everyone on this list. Buddy, Braun, maybe not so much. Aleister Black, I'll pay attention to. I wasn't his biggest fan, but I'll pay attention to him. So Santana Garrett, I'm not really too familiar with her because she didn't do too much while she was in the WWE. And when she did do things, it didn't look great all the time. I'm just going to go ahead and be honest about that. Like off the top of my head, I remember that match she had with Bianca Belair when Belair was kind of debuting on the main roster during COVID, and she couldn't take a bump to save her life. She also kind of had some bad matches over in NXT, but again, she's another one that was loved. I expect her to kind of see her do something different. I could see her turning up on AEW Dark within that women's division and kind of really starting over for herself there. Lana, she's the other one. So Lana doesn't have to wrestle anymore, period. If you look at her social media channels, she has a huge following, massive appeal to advertisers. She's done acting. She can do a lot of different things. And actually, someone on my team over at Daily DDT were going to write a piece about the amount of money she was potentially losing because of WWE instilling that third parties deal, the same one that saw Zelina Vega get cut, and she was supposed to be missing out on almost a seven-figure payday, like annually payday, a seven-figure annual salary because they took away those advertising opportunities from her. So she doesn't need to really get back into the ring and perform anymore. She can continue doing her thing via social media. She can get back into acting. She can do whatever. She could even go over to AEW. I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to see her inserted into Miro's storyline. I tend to agree with that. I think he's finally turned the corner to become someone that we want to see more of, and something that we just don't roll our eyes at head time. But I am looking forward to what might be next for her because I think she has some things to offer, and they missed the boat on her this year, especially going back to Survivor Series last year. They really missed the boat on her because she was coming around. They had that Survivor Series angle where she was the last woman left standing. I wrote about that. Should have been the beginning of her having a babyface run to the title. She didn't have to be some 9-10 month champion holding the belt, defeating all the comers. No, you could have given her one win, one brief moment with the title, and then you could have her lose it in like a legit fashion, kind of like what they did with Dolph Ziggler in the Intercontinental Championship years back when he lost it to The Miz and lost it right back. You could have, or you defeated The Miz and lost it right back. You could have done something like that with Lana because fans wanted to see her get an opportunity. She's been doing better in the ring. You can kind of see her constantly improving. Her character work's always been there, and people kind of loved her for that. So I'm interested in seeing what's next for her. I don't think she's going to go over to AEW. I hope she doesn't because she doesn't need to be inserted into that Miro character. But she was also released. Looking at this list, like I said, I think I expect Aleister Black to stay in wrestling, Ruby Riott, Buddy Murphy, Santana Garrett. I can see her staying and going over to AEW as well too. Lana and Braun Strowman, not quite so sure, but these cuts were huge. As of now, there hasn't been any news about any more. We hope that there's not any more because you hate to see people released like that. You hate to see people treated like that. But this was some big news on Wednesday, and just because of the names that were on, like these weren't people who were backstage and catering all day outside of Santana Guerra. These people who were on TV, consistently on television, and they were just, hey, future endeavored, as we put it. Then the other news item I wanted to talk about from WWE this week was from today, actually. So SummerSlam is going to be in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium. People knew Vegas was pretty much the front runner. They didn't know where, but it looks like Allegiant Stadium is the winner. This is the first time SummerSlam will be at a football stadium. It's considered one of the big four pillar events throughout the year, so it should be pretty massive, especially with them trying to get back to fans and getting back to traveling. This is going to be expected to be a full capacity event. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I was leaning towards thinking about going, but All Out is in September in Chicago, and I've already started doing some planning for that, so that'll probably be at the top of my priority list, to be honest. I'm going to be booking some stuff this week to kind of secure that. Chicago in September, I am not looking forward to that, but still, should be fun. But Vegas for SummerSlam, I'm sure a lot of people will be there to have fun for that. This is the same night as Manny Pacquiao fighting Earl Spence Jr., and this is a really highly anticipated boxing contest, so I'm interested in seeing how the two play off against each other. I don't think there's a lot of crossover between those two audiences. The same way I feel about MMA, I feel like there's not a lot of crossover between those two audiences as well. But it is that same night. I'm also interested in seeing if they do bring in Cardi B to host. Someone on over at Daily DDT, Amit, wrote about Cardi B being a great host for that show, which I believe she should be. And they've also released a promo of her this week. Her song "Up" is in the SummerSlam promo. Obviously, you don't see her, but clearly it's her song. You hear her voice and everything else. So it'd be interesting to see if they make those two align and find a way to bring her in, especially after she went after Lacey Evans on social media the way she did. So let's see what happens. I do hope that they do that. We saw success with Bad Bunny. She does not need to get into the ring, though. I'm going to go ahead and say that. She does not need to get into the ring, but she can be a pretty effective host. I think she has a big enough personality for that. So let's move over and talk about AEW, which I didn't do a review of Double or Nothing. I think I did a preview about that. I'm not going to go too far into reviewing that show, but they had a pretty big moment on Friday on AEW Dynamite. If you don't know, maybe their show was preempted because of the NBA playoffs, and it will be preempted this week as well too. But they gave you a reason to watch on Friday. I actually was not watching live until I happened to see something on social media about Andrade joining AEW. So they were doing the Mark Henry moment that they talked about on Double or Nothing, but he was interrupted by Vicky Guerrero, and that led to her introducing Andrade. Now, Andrade came out, no music, and he said, a couple of lines in Spanish, in English, that he's there to be the face of AEW. He considered himself the face of Latino wrestling first, but he wants to be the face of AEW. But boy, did he look like $1,000,000. The dude was clean. I'm going to use him as one of the screenshots for this show, for this episode, but boy was he clean. Like, I am a big fan of a clean looking suit on an athletic person, athletic woman, man, whatever it may be. He looked pristine. So he comes off as a big star. I've written about him being a big star, talked about him on this show. WWE missed on him. They did. Now AEW has signed him, and he got the full all elite treatment with the graphics, with the social media treatment. He's all elite, and this is a big get for that organization. There's a couple things I want to talk to you about that. Hopefully, he's not stuck with Vicky first and foremost. I'm not a fan of hers, and I almost couldn't get through the video watching it just because she's just like so. I can't. I get that that's her character, but it's like so like go somewhere, go get off my television. Again, like some other people, Jake Hager, get off my TV heat. So that's the first part about that. But some of the matches I would want to see: Pac, Ray Phoenix, Darby Allin, Jungle Boy. Who else is on? Penta. They have so many people on that roster that it could be big to see some of those matches. The one though that everyone's going to be talking about first and foremost is Kenny Omega. I do not think that match should not have any physical interactions until their Triple Mania match in August. That match was already announced. I don't know if they already planned to sign him when that match was announced, but do not let these two get physical before Triple Mania because it denigrates that match, which is now a AEW main event. So if nothing else, they can almost make that match for all the gold. AEW and the Triple Mania, the Mega AAA Championship, whatever the hell its official name is, they should not touch each other. But him and Pac, give it to me in my face all day, every day. Darby, Jungle Boy, everybody I just mentioned, give me all of that all day, every day. And I think that would be a huge moment for for him and for Andrade. Something else that I wrote about this today. Something else for Andrade, I believe this opens up the door for him to go back and do another G1. He did one in 2011, ended up in 8th, but he was Lasombra at the time. I expect to see someone from AEW in the G1 Classic and G1 Climax, and it may be him. I'm thinking it's either going to be him or Jon Moxley. One of those two in the G1. I think that'll be huge. I would love to see that because, again, there's matches there that we want to see all day, every day. This was a big moment for AEW because, as I mentioned, Andrade's a star. He comes off as a star, and I love that about him. Go back and watch his NXT run. He came in with the suspenders and all that other foolishness with the little fedora, the little hat. Nobody got down for that. It wasn't working. Then they added Zelina Vega, and it just blew up. Like it blew up from there. That match with Johnny Gargano is probably one of my favorite matches of the last 5 years. Like again, that match was amazing. I showed it to my ex a couple years back, and she loved it, and she was hooked on him and Zelina from that point going forward. And speaking her name actually makes me think that there's an opportunity for AEW here. Zelina Vega was at the Performance Center, I believe, last week or maybe 2 weeks ago when I wrote about that based on Fightful's news story there, and she's not actually signed, I don't believe. So there were talks about planning on some type of return for her, but nothing is official from what I've heard. She was going to be paired with someone in NXT, much like they did here with Andrade. If I'm Tony Khan, I'm throwing money at her and Aleister Black and bringing them all in to AEW and putting them in as a group. They do all those groups in AEW, the Nightmare Family, the Factory, all this other bullshit I don't care about. But if you tell me that I got Zelina Vega as the mouthpiece, part-time wrestler, and Andrade and Tommy and Aleister Black as a group, that's going to be impressive. And I think that's something that they should really look at. I'm sure someone's already kind of brought it up. I'm not the wrestling genius here, so I'm sure someone's already brought it up and already talked about that, but that would be huge. Andrade is a big name, and I think that putting all three of those names together will be pretty awesome for the promotion and for all those individuals as well too. But this is something that was big to me, and I wanted to answer the question because a pitch was sent to me about whether or not AEW is making the mistake of signing too many cast-offs, and I think they're doing it correct, because if you look at I'll use the two names I mentioned earlier, Shawn Spears and Jon Moxley. Their paths since being signed by AEW have been different, but they've both added value to the promotion. Obviously, Moxley was the champion, doing the damn thing, being the big draw for the organization. Then you had like someone like a Shawn Spears, who was coming from one mid card to the next mid card. He kind of floundered a little bit to begin with, but he kind of found his place, and now he has a important space between the Pinnacle and the Inner Circle feud. I think him and Sammy Guevara are going to do some great stuff. If you look at what they did with like the late Brody Lee, they elevated him in a way that worked. Who else? Jake Hager. Can you really count Dustin Runnels as a cast off? I guess so. FTR. I'm not the biggest fans of FTR, but they're doing good things, just like Shawn Spears I just mentioned within the Pinnacle and Inner Circle situation. But it's funny because no one ever talks about whether or not they're signing too many names from other organizations. Remember, they just brought in Brian Cage. I believe that was last year. Ethan Page was last year, both former TNA or Impact names. They've brought in Thunder Rosa, NWA. She's still with them. They've brought in let me think, who's another name from another promotion. I mean, Sting. Well, Sting is Sting. They brought him in, and I get why people are saying, well, they're bringing in too many names from WWE. But they're bringing in names that matter to wrestling. This Sting acquisition, Paul White, having him on AEW Dark Elevation and leveraging him as a coach backstage. Mark Henry, he was announced at Double or Nothing, leveraging him that way. Leo Rush was at Double or Nothing as well in the Battle Royal, so he looked good. So I think they're doing a good mix, and that made me think about the next Battle Royal is actually probably going to happen at All Out, and that date is 5 days after the 90-day clauses for everyone that we mentioned earlier in the show was released. So they would be eligible to perform in that show. So that already makes that event much more interesting and gives me another reason to want to go, even if it's going to be cold as fuck in Chicago in September. And I don't if you've ever been to Chicago during the winter, and that's not even a winter, it's brick. Like Jim Jones said, it's brick. So to kind of tie things all up, I don't think that AEW is going too far with signing a lot of these names away from WWE. But if you're going to have the conversation, you got to have the full conversation about whether or not that includes Impact or another organization that they may be pulling people from. I think they're doing the right work right now. And there are some things I like about the promotion. There are some things I don't like. I say it every single week, but this worked for me. I think that they're doing some good things here, and I'm excited to see Andrade over in AEW. Those names that were released earlier, I could see a Santana Garrett signing there, Buddy Murphy, and probably Aleister Black. But again, everyone, thank you for listening to this show. We are at the end of episode 88 of the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast. My name is Raphael Garcia, and as always, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this show. If you can, first and foremost, go over to MMAratings.net and .com. That's where you catch all of our flagship content. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, MMA Ratings Net on YouTube. Search MMA Ratings. You can find us there. You can hit us up across social media channels at MMA Ratings Net in both spaces, Instagram and Twitter, MMA Ratings Net. You can catch me. Before I even do that, you can catch the podcast. There's this show, which is weekly, and then there's also the Let's Talk Wrestling podcast, the MMA Ratings podcast, which normally airs on Wednesdays. You can catch that over at YouTube. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel there. You can also check us out on Anchor, SoundCloud. Used to be on SoundCloud. I'll take on SoundCloud anymore. Spotify, Apple iTunes, and Google Podcasts. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter at rgarcia_sports in both spaces. Shawan Hughes, who I co-host the MMA Ratings podcast with, he is at Black Jordan Breen. And Adam Martin is a writer as well for us. And Michael Ford is another individual. You've seen him tweeting out our content as well too. Please be sure to subscribe to their pages as well, their Twitter and Instagrams. But with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and close it out. We're headed to the start of a new week, so please be safe, wear your mask, get vaccinated, and Black Lives Matter.